Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The University of Arizona said it will not sign the compact pushed by the White House to adhere to President Trump's political agenda or risk losing federal funds. The agreement is the latest development that Native student advocates say is driving down opportunities that help outcomes for both students and their communities. We'll hear about that and an account of a harrowing rescue in the same storm that doomed the Edmund Fitzgerald right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. A new study aims to shed light on the hidden impacts of domestic violence in Native communities. The Mountain West News Bureau's Daniel Spalding reports on the effort to understand the unrecognized brain injuries many survivors are living with.
The Urban Indian Health Institute survey aims to find out how common traumatic brain injuries are among Native survivors of domestic and sexual violence. More than 80% of Indigenous women have experienced violence in their lifetime. According to Abigail Echohawk, the Institute's director, many survivors of domestic and sexual violence suffer from brain injuries that never get diagnosed or receive proper care.
They deserve justice, they deserve safety, and they deserve to get the treatment that they need when they've been impacted by traumatic brain injury.
The goal of the survey is to ensure survivors get the right care and support through programs and policies designed to help them heal. The survey began in October and will remain open through January 2026. I'm Daniel Spalding.
A nonprofit has released a new Yupik glossary with behavioral health terms. Yupik speakers, including those affected by the recent Western Alaska storm, which devastated communities, can use it to communicate with their health providers and to understand their mental health better. Ayolna Naiden with the Alaska Desk has more.
Last month, Moses Mahak Wiseman was helping with Yupik translation at the Anchorage shelters that hosted evacuees from the recent Western Alaska storm. He was also sharing a new glossary with Yupik words for behavioral health terms.
When you have a culture of your own that's not a part of American culture, it's a taboo thing to talk about behavioral health and mental health care. So like having this available when it was available, it's just an ease of mind, I think.
Wiseman is the Alaska Native Languages Program Director at the Alaska Institute for Justice. Last month, the nonprofit released a new glossary. People can type in a modern health-related term,
self-stigma,
and listen to its Yupik pronunciation.
Shmenik Gazmukluni.
Wiseman says it should help Yupik interpreters and service providers to break down language barriers and help people understand their health better. Indra Arriaga is the Strategic and Operational Director at the Institute for Justice.
Where you do have a stigma around depression, a stigma around suicide. This is a way of getting information and not feeling like you're exposing yourself, right? It's out there, it's reliable, it's in your language, it's a door.
Arriaga says the glossary has been years in the making in collaboration with Yupik speakers. The plan was to launch the project on November 1st, but when the remnants of the Typhoon Halon forced hundreds of people to evacuate to Anchorage, the organization decided to release it sooner.
The care and the healing of the folks who are here from Kipnuk and other villages is going to continue. So this is a resource that now can really be used in settings where they're going to be talking about different things that affect their mental health.
The organization is now looking for funding to complete a similar glossary, but for terms relevant for emergency care and intake. In Anchorage, I am Alona Naiden.
The National Congress of American Indians says it welcomes the reopening of the federal government to restore stability to critical services to tribes. In a statement, NCAI said during the shutdown, the Indian Health Service largely remained open due to advance appropriations, but it's depending on Congress to extend Affordable Care Act tax credits, and that reopening the government restores funding to food assistance programs that many Native people rely on. The organization says temporary fixes are not enough and that data collected from tribes during the shutdown made clear how long-term lasting solutions and structural funding reforms are needed to honor tribal trust and treaty obligations. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support from Clarkson Potter, publisher of Turtle Island, Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America by Native American chef Sean Sherman. With ancestral and modern recipes, this cookbook showcases diverse foodways of the continent's regions. From comics to games to film and TV, Indigipop X is Native American popular culture. Everyone is welcome this weekend at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Info at indigipopx.com who support this show.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Education advocates in New Mexico say the state's new court-mandated plan to improve education for Native American students falls short of what's needed. It's the latest of drawn-out efforts related to the landmark 2018 Yazzie Martinez judge's decision requiring the state to do right by Native students. That is one of the education-related topics we're tackling today. We'll also hear from a faculty member at the University of Arizona who just officially declared it will not sign President Trump's agreement that offers favorable funding consideration in exchange for a pledge to adhere to a political agenda which eliminates instruction that diminishes conservative ideas. And we'll also talk about the ongoing decline in Native medical student enrollment and the implications for people's health. Listeners can join our conversation today by calling in. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico is Regis Pecos. He is co-director of the Leadership Institute at Santa Fe Indian School, a chair of the Tribal Education Alliance, and the former governor of Coche de Pueblo. He was also the chief of staff for the New Mexico House of Representatives for 12 years and director of policy of legislative affairs in the House of Representatives for another 12 years. Regis, always great to have you on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Joining us from San Francisco, California is Emma Grillinger. She is the president of the Association of Native American Medical Students, and she is a medical student at the University of California at San Francisco. She is Stockbridge Munsee and a descendant of the Oneida Nation. Emma, good morning and welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
And joining us from Tucson, Arizona is Dr. Andrew Curley. He is an associate professor at the School of Geography, Development, and Environment at the University of Arizona. He is Dene. Andrew, good morning and welcome back to the show. Always good to have you on as well.
Good morning, Ya'ate.
Great to have you. Great to have all the guests today. And Regis, I want to begin with you because this work to address education disparities for Native students in New Mexico, it started years ago. Where are we now in the process?
You know, we're not that much farther from when we started in 2018 in reforming education. And I really want to thank you for bringing this across the spectrum reflection on where we are as Indigenous peoples in our country, because you know what Emma is doing, what our distinguished professor is going to be speaking to, are all related, and this is perhaps the most fragile point in our history, where language is at the most fragile state. And as language becomes fragile, it impacts the culture, it impacts the values. So where we are here in New Mexico, recently, the legal team going back after years of delay and inaction in this landmark decision, in September of 2024, filing a joint motion to show that the state still isn't meeting the court's order or its constitutional responsibilities. So now there was a mandated draft plan be submitted in October, and then a final plan that has been filed last week in response to this court mandate.
Okay, Regis, thank you for that update. So, where exactly is this issue not meeting expectations for what is needed? What more needs to happen or be done?
Well, in a state like ours, that is a majority state, 90% of all of our Native children are in public schools, which is about 36,000 students across New Mexico. And, the court's finding and conclusions of law in its 600 plus page report cited some very specific factors in the low education attainment that manifest into generational poverty, that manifest into hunger, manifest into the highest health disparities, and ultimately, when young people lose hope, we have the highest Native American youth suicide in the nation and here in New Mexico. So in a state like ours, for the better part of the entire history of public education, no different than what started almost 150 years ago with the first Indian education policy, built on the mantra of killing language and culture as part of an assimilation process. Where we find ourselves, if we do not do anything different, Sean, is to be forced to contribute to the further assimilation in the way that Western models of education, without responding to the needs of language and culture and history to make education relevant, will continue to contribute to low education attainment. And scholars, historians have said in this case that the root cause of this education crisis is a result of a long history of systemic racism and institutional discrimination by not providing a relevant education for our children that diminishes language and culture ultimately and creates an imbalance that goes from early childhood to the primary to the secondary, and I think all the way to the higher education levels where we're marginalized in something so critical as education is to rebuild our nations and strengthen our sovereign nations to respond to contributing to the quality of life of our people.
Regis, New Mexico tribal governments, tribal communities, and also urban Native organizations that have oversight with this process. How does that work, and to what extent are they providing input that's being considered?
Shortly after this landmark decision in 2018, tribal leaders, because of our work as an indigenous think tank for the last 30 years, asked us to facilitate statewide, helping to facilitate the development of remedies in this case. So we engaged the president, the legislature, the Department of DNA Education in multiple days of dialogue with Mescalero, President, Council Community, Jicarilla, President, Council Community, and the 19 Pueblos, really with a team of subject area experts from our own communities, attorneys, educators, policymakers, a really diverse team that really dissects 600 pages to develop a matrix of what would be the most appropriate response in the development of remedies. And what that resulted is the tribal remedy framework as a specific response by the 23 sovereign nations, recommending to the court, recommending to the state of New Mexico the remedy framework to address a long history that has led to this unfortunate situation. And so that tribal remedy framework has been the basis of policy change. It has been the basis of, one, pushing amendments to existing law where necessary, creating new legislation to help drive and guide new appropriations. And so we've been successful on our own as a result of this tremendous leadership of the coalition that also includes the urban Indian population, which is huge here in New Mexico. And so with that, we have developed a blueprint and a roadmap in response to this landmark decision. And it's that has been the biggest frustration, that is foundational and fundamental to transform education, that creates the kind of balance that our tribal leaders want and aspire for our children's education. That is their articulated vision, and that is what the state has not embraced to incorporate, even in its first draft plan that the tribal leaders went on record to declare that the first draft plan was a complete failure to meet the court mandate in developing the remedies to the constitutional obligations. And in this final report just filed last week, we have a team of subject area experts pretty much dissecting because of what is at stake and concluding that while there are improvements, it's not something that we can accept to compromise the future of generations of our children.
Regis Pecos kicking off our conversation here today on Native America Calling. We're learning about issues here with the State of New Mexico Public Education Department and how Native American students are being served in public schools in New Mexico. The phone lines are open for listeners who would like to join our conversation today. 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848. Are you the parent or the grandparent or the relative of a Native student in a New Mexico public school right now? Or maybe you're a student yourself and you're listening to the show today. Give us a call. We would like to hear your thoughts with regard to how students in your family are being educated in public schools in New Mexico, and whether or not you feel that there are improvements that need to be made, there are issues that need to be addressed. You can share your thoughts, share your insights in our forum, Native America Calling. Just pick up your phone and call 1-800-996-2848. A new exhibition by the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe explores the work by the iconic Southwest artist from the Pueblo perspective. O'Keeffe's work is so globally popular that some Native American artists say it overshadows the cultural importance by the land's original inhabitants. We'll hear more on the next Native America Calling.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, gift shop discounts, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. We're getting perspectives on educational issues today in various parts of the country. If you have comments about trends in Native education, give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's speak now with Dr. Andrew Curley at the University of Arizona. And Andrew, we mentioned at the top of the show, the University of Arizona will not sign the White House Compact on higher education. What input did faculty have in that decision?
Yeah, thanks for bringing attention to this important topic. So as you said, the University of Arizona has declined the Trump administration's offer to create this compact that was ideologically rigid and was trying to enforce the administration's dogma into higher education, how we teach and how we grade and what topics we can we can talk about, and that was fundamentally at the university. This university and others have found to be a violation of a principle that we hold across all these universities, a principle of academic freedom. And so a lot of the faculty voiced opposition. We organized, petitioned, had rallies outside of the president's office in the central center of campus, and us as Native faculty, we were talking about it. We didn't come forward with any kind of official resolution by the time that the university rejected it, but many of us in conversation were finding that this would be a real threat to the kind of research that we do, the kind of programming we do. And it should be said that we've already been suffering the consequences of the administration's ideological enforcement of its values on higher education. So anything that had to do with diversity, anything that had to do with environmental justice, anything that had to do with indigenous peoples, a lot of these grants that were federally funded that were already awarded have been pulled, withdrawn, leaving a lot of students high and dry, leaving a lot of faculties looking for money and other resources to fund Native students. So it's been a real difficult time over the last 11 months since we've been dealing with the university's, with this administration's approach to higher education.
Andrew, what is the downside of not signing the compact? And is there any additional pressure that you think could possibly change the university's position?
I mean, it's all about money. And so the carrot that was offered in this compact was special status of the university with the federal government for awarding federal grants, federal money. So the Trump administration is trying to reprioritize what kind of money it has and how it spends it. And so they were saying, if you restrict what you teach, if you enforce these things that we're asking in this compact, a lot of it having to do with what we can teach, how we can talk about things, then you will have special access to money. And actually, our president, Suresh Garamali, he was just recently appointed president by the Arizona Board of Regents. In his letter back to the Department of Education, says, we don't seek any special status. We believe that we can achieve these grants through merit. Like, we can actually, we're a Research One university. We have top faculty in the country. We can do this without any kind of particular privilege. So we rejected that based on the kind of merit that the compact was insinuating, not the merit, the kind of special relationship the compact was insinuating with the university. So there isn't really a downside. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
What about the courses that you teach and the topics that you address? How do you see the demands of the compact impacting your own teaching?
Well, there's like vague things in the compact, like you can't teach ideas that belittle or punish or spark violence against conservative ideas. And so who's the enforcer of that, right? How do we determine that? What kind of criteria is drawn up to say that what you're teaching is speaking against these ideas? And often, we find that this administration, the vice president, has been very anti-Indian, very much against Indigenous Peoples Day. He just recently described Indian people as in a state of savagery when Christians, quote unquote, came into the continent. So there's this attitude towards Native peoples that is in the top of the administration, that if we teach Native American history, if we teach narratives that are speaking against the colonial narrative, we can be subject to reprimand, and those courses can be forcefully removed if we sign those compacts. There's even a potential of eliminating Native studies, eliminating American Indian studies through certain interpretations of this grant, of this compact. So there's so much vagueness that's left in it that the Department of Education becomes the sole enforcer and determiner of what is and what isn't acceptable speech, that it's a chilling effect, and it can ultimately lead to me not being able to teach like a class that I teach, Native American geography, where we talk about the history of our peoples on this continent even prior to the establishment of the United States. So these kinds of histories, these kind of courses, our ability to share cultural knowledge, they can be accused of not falling in line with the compact and be forcefully removed from our curriculum. So there is a real danger to our pedagogy here at the university level if the university were to sign a compact along these lines.
What are you hearing from U of A students, Native students, and their concerns?
I mean, everybody's concerned. It's they don't see this as a. I mean, we were happy that the university didn't sign the compact. It feels like anything that any Native organization, anything that prioritizes Native history and culture is subject to scrutiny and attack if the compact were to be signed, if this agreement were to be enforced. So there was a sense of relief that this thing wasn't signed or was turned down by the university as it was on October 20th.
There is some interesting wording in the compact for academic excellence in higher education. I'm going to read some of it right now. Academic freedom is not absolute. Andrew, how do you interpret that? What does that mean?
Well, that's a total misreading of principles, of philosophy, of the kind of ideals that are foundational for our system of government and the country we live in. It's universalisms is why we have to adhere to those things. Like it applies to me as it applies to you. So you can't hinge. You can't say it's not absolute. It has to be absolute. Academic freedom can't exist if it's not absolute. I have to have the ability to speak and teach the things that I teach. And, if there's somebody teaching something that I don't agree with, they still have the right and they still have the freedom to do that. That's what academic freedom is about. If it's not absolute, it doesn't exist.
Now, the pressure to eliminate diversity initiatives, and we know as Native people, we're classified as a political identity in many situations. So some of these DEI initiatives might not directly apply to us, but do you have any information at all about how some of these efforts could impact student recruiting or even other support services for Native students there on campus?
Yeah, that was a thing. That was like immediately Indigenous people were placed into this category of a diverse identity, and then we had to petition to say, hey, we're actually, we do have a unique political identity. Although, truth be told, it is racially defined. We're the only people in the country that have something called a blood quantum, right? And this is not our logic. It was something the United States came up with. So it's like we are still, dealing with these ideas of race that came in from the federal government, that came in through the Indian service. And now they want to pretend like race doesn't exist and we can't talk about it. So I think it's a fundamental challenge when history is being so narrowly and ideologically understood and defined through this administration that we can't even talk about how Indigenous identity has become complicated because of outside ideas of race and how they've been imposed upon us. And then that does really have bearing on what kinds of services we can organize around, what kind of asks we can make of the university, right? If we want to go back to the land grab report that was in High Country News and think about the special responsibility land grant universities have with the Indigenous nations on which whose lands were financialized and became basis of endowment, it's hard to make those conversations. It's hard to push universities and administrators on that if we're being denied a voice, if that voice is being reinterpreted as a race or diverse voice rather than a voice of people who were indigenous to this continent and whose lands were used in order to make these universities in the first place. So it's just a real reworking, a 180 and ideological rigidity that's enforced on how we talk about these things and what kind of conversations we can have.
All right, thank you, Andrew. 1-800-99-NATIVE. That's the number to join today's conversation. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Give us a call. The number of Native American students applying for and getting into medical school has declined substantially. Let's talk about that now with Emma Grillinger. She is a medical student at the University of California at San Francisco. And Emma, this report that came out earlier this year from the Association of American Medical Colleges, steep decline, not only in Native students applying to, but also getting accepted to medical school. What's behind the decline and what's it going to take to turn it around?
Yeah, I think this is a great question and also relevant to the other kind of conversations that we're having today. I think some of the older data shows us that, relative to our representation in the population, Native representation in application and matriculation to medical school has really been declining over the last 20 years since we have data from the AAMC. But this new data showing that kind of in the last few years, there has been an even more dramatic decline in both application and even more significantly matriculation or acceptance to medical school. And I think when you look at some of the other data that's been published by folks doing this research, it really demonstrates that the biggest and most dramatic kind of bottleneck in getting into medical school is really before you even apply to medical school. And I think that's, maybe because we're not doing a great enough job supporting the Native youth or Native college students who may have an interest in medicine in pursuing their application to medical school. And so I think, going back to the first conversation about supporting our youth in high school and getting them through early education is really probably the biggest bottleneck in getting people to medical school and to becoming physicians.
And Emma, these efforts to eliminate DEI programs, do you think that has any impact with regard to how Native students might just view medical school? I mean, sitting there, I'm thinking of maybe an undergrad thinking, well, geez, maybe this isn't a field I want to pursue now.
Yeah, I think absolutely this is true. And I think, within the students who are in medical school, I know those of us, already who have started medical school have noticed a difference in kind of the amount of support that we receive from the school, the amount of funding to have events on campus, to travel to conferences such as the Association of American Indian Physicians National Conference that a lot of us really try our best to get to every year just to be in community because, many of us are the only Native medical student at our institution or one of very few. And so these national events are really, really important in kind of maintaining wellness and getting us through the rest of the year. So I think the atmosphere has absolutely changed, probably both in the folks who are thinking about applying to medical school, but also in, kind of maintaining the atmosphere of support for the folks who are already in medical school as well.
How about you as a Native med student? What's the best kind of support that you can receive?
Yeah, I think being, or having a solid community is really, really essential in kind of getting me through the rest of the challenging year. I feel really lucky that actually at UCSF there's been a kind of a resurgence in the Native community getting together and doing stuff on campus in the time that I've been here. As a first-year medical student, there really wasn't much of a community here, and over the last 3 years, the staff have really taken on the lead of getting us together and having different events. I think tonight, actually, there's a SAGE workshop at our county hospital hosted by some of the staff here. So it's really great to have those little events. It makes a huge difference in getting me through kind of the tougher times in medical school, but I definitely feel for the students who are at institutions where there isn't opportunities like that.
Emma, I imagine you go out and you do presentations, you talk to undergrads, you maybe even talk to high school students or junior high students interested in pursuing medical degrees, becoming physicians. What's your message to those people?
I think that for the Native folks who are really interested in medicine, I think there's actually quite a few opportunities that can really help you get there, but they sometimes are siloed and you won't hear about them unless someone tells you. I know that it took a huge community of folks to help get me into medical school, including my mentors like Dr. Brett Benally Thompson and Dr. Eric Broad at the University of Wisconsin and Oregon Health Sciences University. And through the help of programs like the Native American Center for Health Professions and We Are Healers and the Northwest Native American Center for Excellence, all of those programs really helped me to get where I am. And so when I speak with folks interested in medicine, I really try to spread the word about these programs because they're amazing and they're doing incredible work to help create this community of support for Native folks interested in medicine. And I really hope that more people know about them and learn about them because I think they're doing incredible things to help support our folks get into medical school and feel supported while they're there as well.
Emma, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all this information with our listeners, and best of luck to you in your career going forward.
Thanks so much.
1-800-99-NATIVE, that's the number for anyone who would like to join our conversation. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we will talk about a story with regard to Native fishermen who were caught in a very, very bad storm on Lake Superior in northern Michigan, the area around northern Michigan, the Great Lakes region, 50 years ago. Same time of the legendary shipwreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So stay with us. We'll be right back. And again, that phone number for anyone who would like to join the conversation, 1-800-996-2848.
Support from Clarkson Potter, publisher of Turtle Island, Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America by Native American chef Sean Sherman. With ancestral and modern recipes, this cookbook showcases diverse foodways of the continent's regions.
Need an actionable plan to achieve your goals? Kaufman & Associates strengthens Native organizations through culturally grounded strategic planning. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Native America Calling. This week, people are reflecting on the 50th anniversary of the legendary shipwreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The iron ore freighter went down in Lake Superior during a devastating storm and was the subject of the popular Gordon Lightfoot song. But there is another story about Native fishermen who were also caught on Lake Superior during that storm on that night. We're going to hear an account of that now. So joining us from Interlochen, Michigan is Ellie Katz. She is a reporter for Interlochen Public Radio and a producer with the Points North podcast. Ellie, welcome to Native America Calling.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you produced this story for Points North. It's called The Other Side of the Storm, and you talked with two gentlemen by the names of Chris Parrish and John Lufkins. They're citizens of the Bay Mills Band of Chippewa Indians. Why were they out in this storm on November 10th, 1975?
Yeah, so they were fishermen. They were doing a lot of subsistence fishing, but also, selling a little bit. And they were just doing what they did most days, especially in November when whitefish are spawning and the fishing is really good. The story starts, they're on a beach on Whitefish Bay in Lake Superior deciding whether or not to go out. They know the forecast looks bad, but they've been out in bad weather before. They're used to fishing in storms on Superior. And, they're small operations, kind of bootstrapped operations. And so that's part of their risk calculation too, is they've got all these nets out there that are handmade, that are expensive to lose, and if they leave them out there, they're going to get shredded. So they decide to make the 15-minute trip out in their boats into the bay and get their nets, and they end up getting caught in this storm that picks up really, really quickly.
And, okay, so a bad storm. Now, were they able to get to land, or were they stuck out there for the duration? How did it all transpire?
So what happens is they kind of go out separately, and John Lufkins, who you mentioned, he got a little luckier. So he managed to make it to this island out there in the bay called it's called Tequamanon Island, sometimes called Pomeroy's Island. It's this tiny little island, with a few scrubby trees on it and mostly just boulders and rocks. And it was a common spot for fishermen from Bay Mills to hunker down overnight if they needed to. So he makes it to this island, and there's a little shack on the island that he camps out in. And a couple more fishermen actually make it into the island from the storm. And when they make it in, he's like, "Are you sure everybody's made it in? Everybody who was out fishing?" And they think everybody has, but he decides to just take a lap around the island. And when he does that, as this storm is kind of raging on and getting stronger and stronger, he sees this little orange dot out in the water. And that was a life vest that Chris Parrish was holding. He and his dad, Francis, they were out fishing. They didn't get as lucky. The waves and the wind that had picked up capsized, this small 17-foot fishing boat they were in. And they had been floating, hanging onto the hull of their boat for hours and hours and hours in this really cold, rough weather. And John decides he has to try and rescue them. So he ends up leaving the island, going out to try and save Chris and Francis. And it's a really dramatic story, but he does manage to find his way to that little orange dot, to where Chris and Francis are, rescue them, and bring them back to Tequamanon Island.
Okay, all right. Let's listen to an extended excerpt from the podcast. We pick this up hearing from Chris Parrish, who is talking about the increasingly hopeless situation for him and his father clinging to the hull of their capsized fishing boat. They've been in the water for hours, and they see the land of this small island that we're talking about, but they aren't getting any closer. Chris's father is growing weaker, and he tells Chris to see if he can make it to the island by himself.
He wanted me to go, but I could never leave him. That didn't even cross my mind, Told him we're in this together. We're sink or swim. We're in this together.
So they kept hanging on, and the island started to shrink from view again.
I got really scared then. I thought, man, if we drift away from this island anymore, we're not gonna make it.
Chris kept his eyes glued on the shore. He saw the boat, he knew people were there, and then he saw 4 men come out of the shack. He recognized them, including his cousin, John Lufkins.
I was trying to holler at them, and I couldn't holler at them. They couldn't hear anything.
Chris screamed and screamed and screamed until he was hoarse. But the waves and the wind were just a dull roar, like a train coming. His voice couldn't cut through. He remembers what happened next a bit differently than John.
When they went back into the building, that was probably the lowest point I had. My stomach just sank. I knew Dad didn't have too much longer, because he was pretty bad then.
He scrambled for a way to try to get their attention if they came out again. He took off his life vest that was still only half on and held it in his right hand. And then he waited.
Probably 10, 15 minutes. A piece of tar paper blew off the roof of the shack and blew in front of the window. And I see the shack door open, and I got my knees up on the bottom of the boat, and I stood up as tall as I could and still hold on to Dad. And I had that orange life jacket. I had it up as high as I could get it. And I'm sorry. John came to the door to look and see what went by the window. And he seen me waving that orange jacket, that orange life jacket. I knew he seen me, because he went back in so fast. All of a sudden the door come open, and all 4 of the guys that were in there came out. I knew somebody was coming to help.
From the shore of the island, Chris looked like a little orange dot. John just saw him once between the rising waves, but that was all he needed. He knew someone was still out there, and they needed help.
So I said, just go get the boat ready. So they ran down, put the motor on the boat.
John started stripping out of his heavy, warm clothes.
You look at the water, and it was like suicide to want to go, but you can't just let somebody die, you know.
He started to think about his wife. He'd only been married about 5 years.
Had one daughter, Heather, she was 4. And Shannon, the second one, she was just brand new, born in October. So I'm like, well, Ronnie's young enough to find a new man. Heather will remember me. Shannon will only have pictures, you know.
Then he got into the boat. The men pushed him out. He'd accepted whatever was about to happen. Chris was no longer in sight, but John gunned the boat to where he remembered seeing the life vest. The waves welled up around him like walls. And when he got onto a crest, he'd look around at landmarks to orient himself and squinted into the mountains of black water for a speck of orange.
And I'm like, damn, I'm not making any progress.
He turned the boat a little and went up over another big crest. Then he saw them. And he realized it was his cousin Chris and his uncle, Francis. They were still there, still alive, still hanging on to their capsized boat.
That's a miracle they were still hanging on to the boat after being in the water that long.
He yelled out to them.
Chris, I'm going to come in between you, the bow of the boat. Each of you grab one side of the boat and crawl in so as not to capsize me.
He came over at us, and I reached up and I grabbed the side of the boat and I pulled myself up and I threw one leg in and I got halfway in and I was laying on the side of the boat and I couldn't get in. I was stuck. That's when it hit me that I had hypothermia and I was just exhausted.
John let go of the motor and yanked Chris in, but the wind blew them away from Francis.
I was thankful to be there, but all I could think about was Dad. I told John, I said, we gotta go get him, John. The boat by then had blown around in another circle, so we came back at him, come at Dad again, and thank God he stayed on the boat. He didn't get washed off. I hollered at John. I said, John, just drive your boat right up on the back of that boat, our boat. I said, and I'll get a hold of Dad and I won't let him go.
So that's what John did.
All Dad could do was lift his hands up like this. He just lifted them up and I got a hold of his wrists and I got him up halfway into the boat and I didn't have the strength to get him the rest of the way in the boat.
I said, don't let him go. I said, I'll be right up there. And I reached down and grabbed Unc and I told Chris, okay, I got him, let him go.
Dad slithered down to the bottom of the boat like a snake and he had his head down underneath the seats and stuff and his feet up in the air. And we were an awful sight, I'll bet, but we were alive.
It had been a long time since John left the island for them, close to an hour, and they were drifting with no view of land. And then John caught sight of the shore on the mainland, miles away, and guessed, based on that, where the island might be. And he headed in that direction.
I said, keep your eyes peeled for the island. Well, he couldn't see nothing except water. You know, Chris goes, are we going to die, Johnny? I was bull. I risked my life, come out here to save you or die. I said, no, we're going to make it.
John kept pointing his small fishing boat toward where he thought the island was. Chris watched for land. Francis lay unresponsive. They felt the island before they saw it. The waves calmed down around their boat, and they made it back to shore.
God, when I got out of the boat and I hit the land, the realization of what I had done finally sunk in, you know.
He'd saved them and survived.
And my legs just totally collapsed, and I'm down on my knees, and I'm like, wow, this is weird. It took a while to get my composure and get back up. Just complete relief.
It's beyond miraculous. I can't even believe it. I mean, and if that piece of tar paper hadn't blown over that window, who knows? What was it like interviewing these men and putting this story together?
I mean, their stories are so powerful and they remember the details so well, especially Chris. Like when he talks about this memory and this story, you can hear him. He gets really emotional because he told me he can still remember every single detail. He can still remember what the wind sounded like, what the water felt like, how it felt when he saw that he'd be able to swim to the island, but he couldn't leave his dad. I mean, it's still very raw and present for him. And it was really emotional, but really powerful to talk with him about it, because after this happened, you know, they didn't really talk about it for years and years and years and years. Like his daughters just heard about this story a few months ago when he told them that this story would be coming out on this podcast. And so it's really raw and it's hard to talk about, but Chris said, you know, talking about it and having it out there has helped a little bit, but it's definitely, you know, alive and well in his memory, even though it did happen 50 years ago this week.
How old were they at the time?
Chris was 22 years old and John was 32. So Chris is now 72, John is now 82. And yeah, it's still very fresh.
I share sometimes. I lived in Michigan as a child, and I was in third grade when the Edmund Fitzgerald went down, but I don't remember it, actually. I remember hearing the song, but I don't remember the actual event. But tell me more about how this time is regarded there, specifically in northern Michigan, Upper Peninsula area, in the whole Edmund Fitzgerald legacy.
It's a really important legacy. You know, this was a really big deal when it happened. It was one of the biggest, most technologically advanced ships on the Great Lakes. When it sank, the entire crew of 29 men died. It was a real tragedy and really unexpected. And I think especially in the UP, where so many people do work on the water and are sailors or fishermen, it made it feel so much more real and dangerous. And I know, you know, when the Gordon Lightfoot song first came out a year after the Edmund Fitzgerald sank, Chris and John told me that they couldn't stand to listen to it. Like it was too emotional. They felt like their story was too tied up with what had happened to those men. And if one little thing had gone differently, they would have also died out there. And, you know, it took them years, but they eventually did start liking the song. And one of my favorite things Chris said when I talked to him is that he likes the song now because it reminds him that they made it, but ultimately him, his father, the other Bay Mills fishermen, and those men that were on the Edmund Fitzgerald were just out there trying to do the same thing. They were just trying to make a living, and it went two different ways. And the song is just a reminder of that.
Okay, like I said earlier, absolutely miraculous. And if it hadn't been for that piece of tar paper, none of them would have. Okay. Thank you so much, Ellie, for joining the show today. Really quickly, where can people go to hear the whole podcast?
Yeah, you can go to Points North, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also online at pointsnorthpodcast.org, and you can find us on social media at Points North Podcast.
Okay, thank you. And we are out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up our conversation. I want to thank all of our guests today, Regis Pecos, Dr. Andrew Curley, Emma Grillinger, and Ellie Katz. Please don't forget to join us again tomorrow when we'll get perspectives about work by non-Native artists that portray land, people, and ideas important to Native people. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
From comics to games to film and TV, all Native American popular culture will be at the Indigenous Pop Culture Expo. The Indigenous Pop Culture Expo showcases Native American and Indigenous creatives and communities in a way that dispels the myth natives are a people of the past, instead showing Native identity in all its past, present, and future glory. Everyone is welcome at the Expo this weekend at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Info at indigipopx.com, who support this show. From comics to games to film and TV, all Native American popular culture will be at the Indigenous Pop Culture Expo. The Indigenous Pop Culture Expo showcases Native American and Indigenous creatives and communities in a way that dispels the myth natives are a people of the past, instead showing Native identity in all its past, present, and future glory. Everyone is welcome at the Expo this weekend at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Info at indigipopx.com, who support this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.